Hello, welcome to Piplify. Today we will discuss about the Jubilee cycle and what is the impact of Jubilee cycle in our lifetime. Right, let's get started. If you take a look on the Leviticus 25, right, there are some story about Jubilee, right? So there is also a story about the sabbatical. So what is it? Jubilee and sabbatical is all about. Sabbatical is basically is a 7 year cycle. And then Jubilee is actually 49 or 50 year cycle, depending on how you count it. There are two versions of it. Right? On the year of Sabbath, basically the children of Israel is refrained or not allowed to show their field or prune their vineyard or reaping the harvest, the aftergrowth, or gathering the grapes of unintended vine. And also on the Jubilee years, which is on the 50th years, the children of Israel is not allowed to sowing their land, reaping their aftergrowth, harvesting the untended vine, return to his property, and they also have to return to this clan. This is says in the Bible on the verse 8, and you shall count seven Sabbath of years 7 times 7 years, so that the seven Sabbath of the years amount to 49 years. Then you are to sound the horn wide and open on the 10th day on the seventh month on the day of atonement, and you shall sound it throughout your land on the first 10. You are to consecrate on the 50th year and proclaim the liberty of the land to all inhabitants, and it shall be your jubilee, right? When each of you return to his property and to his clan, right? The 50th year basically is the years of jubilee. So we have 7 times 7 cycle here, as you see. There are 7 cycle of Sabbath, and the 7 time of Sabbath you will have the every 7 day there will be a Sabbath day, and then on the seventh cycle, after 49 cycle, there will be the 50th cycle, right? However, there are different versioning here, the 49 cycle and 50-year cycle, because there are two different interpretations. Basically, the Orthodox Jews believe in the 49 cycle, which is the 50th year of Jubilee will be the first count of the next cycle. And so the Jubilee year is 49 cycle based on the Orthodox Jews. However, mainly for the modern Christian, I believe that Jubilee years is the 50-year cycles, and the next cycle count started after the Jubilee, right? So that basically 50-year cycle. All right, next. And then uh, in this year of Jubilee, the children of Israel is has to return to his own property, right? So basically, tracking down the exact year of sabbatical and jubilee is very difficult, right? Because the reason here, Israel has not celebrated sabbatical or jubilee years for thousands of years, right? Since diaspora of Israel, right? Jewish diaspora, many people are going out from Israel and they are no longer celebrating sabbatical years or jubilee years. So it's basically very difficult to track down what is the exact year. And then also the different counting of the year, uh, which is 49 year, as I mentioned, for the Jewish people, and for the Christian, basically are 50 years. And then also there will be a different calendar system being used. Basically, Jews are using the lunar calendar, and we are now modern people are using the solar calendar. Okay, many attempt actually has been done to track down the exact jubilee year when it's happening, right? However, there are various version and various inaccuracy. And for this reason, we are not trying to pin down the exact sabbatical or jubilee year. However, we can see it from the historical record, right? And what is the impact of things happening, then we can see how it's a jubilee year, whether it is jubilee or sabbatical years. But however, we are not sure whether this is 100% accurate. Okay, and also we'll discuss about this detail about the things that happening during sabbatical years or jubilee years. We can track it down from the event that happening recently, right? Financial crisis that happen every 7 to 8 years. This is we'll discuss about this on the another video regarding the semi cycle. And today we'll discuss about the economic crisis that happen every 50 or 60 years, which is happening during jubilee cycle. And you know when it's jubilee years depend on this, right? And then the pandemic that happened around 100 or every 120 years. And this is a pandemic cycle. We'll discuss about it. What is the impact of Jubilee cycle and causing this pandemic? And actually, in the Jubilee, there is a blessing and punishment after the Jubilee. One of the punishment is actually a plague. Those plague that cause a pandemic cycle that happened after the or during the Jubilee years or around the Jubilee years, right? So here, if you take a look on the Bible, it say the price shall in greater number of the year and decrease in proportion number of years. So before Jubilee years, the price will increase, and after Jubilee year, the price will decrease. And now you may wonder, so right, what we will eat in the 7 years, right? If you are not allowed to gather and produce. God says, I will send blessing to you in the 6 years, right? There will be a year of abundance on the 6 years, and then so that the land may yield crops sufficient for 3 years. So there will be a difficulty of 3 years here during the Sabbath and Jubilee until while you are sowing the 8 years, right, which is the Jubilee year, you will be eating from the previous harvest. So basically, the people here are basically suffering. They are not allowed to harvest their land, so they have nothing to eat. However, God sent the abundance on the 6 years so that they can eat for the next 3 years, right, until the ninth harvest comes in. So the harvest is basically the main day, which is the next cycle, right? However, depend on the 49 years of cycle, there will be first cycle in the 50 years of Jubilee started. However, on the 50 cycle delivers, especially the next cycle will start on the after, which is during the harvest day, after the Jubilee or during the harvest day. All right. So what is happening during the Jubilee years? Basically, during Jubilee years, no one are allowed to plant or to harvest. In modern world, it translates that the business will go bankrupt and unemployment will arise, right? And everyone will have to return to their family and property. So when this happens in modern world, jobless people are migrating back from the city where they find a work and job, and basically they have to migrate back to their hometown. So you can see during Jubilee years, a lot of people or property price in the city will go down, right? As people are moving back to their hometown, to the village, right? The land will be redeemed. So what happened during the Jubilee year, the land will be redeemed. In the old days, and in the children of Israel, they are basically following theocracy, which means the land is belong to God and can be sold permanently. Original owner can purchase back of the land during Jubilee years. However, in the modern world, the land is basically owned by the government, and many developers actually bought this land from the government and sell it to you, right? And then during this Jubilee years, many developers got bankrupt, and the land will have to be repossessed by the government. Right? And the house, the next thing will be happen is a property. As you see here in the first 29, if men sell a house in a walled city, he retains the right of redemption until full years of his sale. During a year may be redeemed. It is not redeemed by the end of the full year, then the house in the walled city is permanently transferred to his buyer and his descendants. It is not released in the Jubilee, but the house in the village will with no wall around them are to be considered as open field. They may be redeemed and they shall be released in the Jubilee. Right. The redemption of the house happened, right? Because every house has the original owner, right? So in the when the Israelites taking the land of Palestine at the time, every clan have their own land and they have ownership upon the land and upon the house on it. So during Jubilee, the original ownership, right, because they cannot sell it permanently, right? They have the original ownership of the land. So after they sell out the land to another people, they have the right to redeem back the land. So basically, the original ownership will return back to them. So they can purchase back the land during the Jubilee. Ownership of the house in the city, however, can be transferred to another people, but in the village will remain to the original owner. So original ownership on the city house can be transferred to another people, right, during Jubilee. What happened during modern world? Actually, when you buy the land or the house, it is the original ownership is belong to the bank. Why? Because you take the loan from the bank, right? The bank actually has the equity on your loan, right? Basically, bank has the ownership of your house, right? However, the ownership will be transferred to you after you paid in full, correct? Right? So during Jubilee, many people who borrow money from the bank, right, the mortgager become insolvent because they lost their job, right? They are unable to pay the house, and the house has to be repossessed by the bank. That's what's happening in the modern world. Okay, now poor. Another thing that happened during Jubilee is the poor will be helped, right? In modern world, what is happening is that the government has to bail out the bankrupt company and to hand out stimulus package or cash to alleviate the poverty or the people who are in need. Right? And then the next what happened during Jubilee is the slave will be released. Right? In modern world, this means that many business goes bankrupt, factory closed down, service industry shut down, and many people will lose their job and have to return to his hometown. They're unable to pay their house, so the house getting repossessed by the bank. Okay, the next thing will happen, the debt has to be forgiven, right? In modern world, this means that uh, many people got bankrupt, insolvent, unable to pay back the loan. Bank has to write off the credit card, student loan, personal loan, business to file bankruptcy. The business itself is also unable to pay their debt, so they also have to file bankruptcy chapter to avoid the debt repayment. Right? That's what happening and the situation during Jubilee. So Jubilee year is basically is a bad year for everyone. It's a good year of blessing, but in actuality, a lot of things, bad thing happening, right? Okay, now how we know when the Jubilee happened? We can learn from the historical record, right? What is happening quite recently. So in 1917 or 1998, on there is a Balfour Declaration, which is a proclamation of the State of Israel. This is the prelude of the Jubilee, the beginning of Jubilee. And this happening also in 1967, 1968. This is 50 years after, right? The 60 wars, the reunification of Jerusalem. This is happening exactly 50 years after, which is 1968. And during 2017, Jerusalem is recognized as the capital of Israel. So this is historical record where we can pin down the exact day of the Jubilee. But this is not the Jubilee year. This is the prelude of what is coming during Jubilee. Right? On the 49 year, which on the 7 years, there is a Shemitah years in 1918 to 1918-19. So actually, because there is an overlapping between the date between Jewish calendar and our modern calendar, right? Solar calendar. Jewish calendar started from October and end to August, right? Our calendar started from January and end of December. Right? So usually October is the beginning of the year of the Jewish calendar. So during this time, Spanish flu began and unemployment started to rise and global GDP dropped after the Balfour Declaration signed off a year later. Right? And then after that, on the Jubilee years, which is on the 1920, the Spanish flu spread and global famine happened. Recession began and unemployment peaked. Dow Jones Index crashed 40%. And then 1920s, after the post-Jubilee, then the economic reset happened, where the world economic crisis, US in Great Depression, currency collapse, gold standard started, PGI crashed 80% in 1929. And what is happening around 1970 and after the 60 war of reunification of Israel. the economic recession began, unemployment rise, right? In 1968 and 1970, where the Jubilee years happened, the inflation spiked, interest rate hike, housing crash, and the homeless spike, right? Global hyperinflation happening all around the world, right? U.S. economy are in stagflation. They got return. The country are returned ended the gold standard. They started the gold standard 50 years before, but they ended in 1970s, and the TGI crashed, right? 50% in 1973. LSE London Stock Exchange crashed 75% in 1978. Right. And then what is happening quite recently, after Jerusalem recognized as the capital of Israel, marking the beginning of the Jubilee, right? The COVID pandemic began in 2019, and economic slowdown began. Lockdown implemented all over the world. As COVID pandemic continued to spread in 2020, unemployment spiked, and as well S&P 500 crashed 40%. And then what happening post Jubilee is inflation spike, rate hike, and more to come. So why this happened? Is there any reason behind it? If you study the economic, you will understand what is called the debt cycle. Right? The debt cycle is basically a huge cycle that happens 50 years, every 50 years. Right? And every 50 years, in the beginning of that cycle, basically the central bank, right, they will extend the loan to everybody, to countries, to corporate companies, and to also personal loan to everybody, right, to buy the house or to pay the car or whatever, right? So the central bank will extend the loan for 50 years, and during this 50 years, there is some minor financial crisis, or we call it small business cycle that happen every 7 to 8 years. So we have a large debt cycle that's happening 50 to 60 years, and also we have a small debt cycle or small uh, business cycle that is happening every 7 to 8 years. And then when the debt is created, right, when the debt is extended, actually the money is created. So we have the central bank basically that is printing the base money, right? And also we have the private bank that extend this money to become a credit and loan it to the people. And while they are loaning to people, actually they are creating a digital money. So no longer money being printed, right? But it is printed digitally. And uh, this is called the uh, what's it called is extending the loan to the people, right? So there are multiplier effect on it. So there is a base money and the credit money being extended. The credit is much more in terms of number than the real piece money. The real piece money basically is only this line. It's only maybe like 10% of the real credit that extended on the people. So during the 50 years, the amount of the loan of credit in the economic system is basically massive, right? It can be 10 times of the original piece money. And so after this, people become over leveraged by the credit, and economy become very high indebted. So during this time, they are no longer able to absorb more debt, right? So then the bubble was created, and during this time, the bubble start to burst, right? The debt is peaking, interest rate already in the bottom, and the inflation spike, and the government has to fight the inflation, and they have to raise or checking up the interest rate higher than the inflation, and the crash coming, right? And what the crash coming? This called deflating. So basically, they're deflating their their debt ratio from 10 times to become the same, equal, or maybe below the original base amount of money. So the debt lowers on this point of time. So this deflation can that's happening after the Jubilee years. So the Jubilee year is the peak where everything happening suddenly crashed down, right? And then post Jubilee is the bad year actually because the deflation coming on, the deflation coming on, everything price comes down, people lost their job and they are unable to pay their debt. This is the bad things happening subsequential after the Jubilee years. And this could last a decade, right? All right. and what we learn from the history. Okay, take a look on the flourishing or post-Jubilee years, which is the panic after 1920, right? So during that time, the banking bubble are breaking up, manufacture are perishing, agriculture are stagnating, the economic are in distress. There is a happening panic in 1819 in the US, started as a result of previous unregulated banking by the first bank of the US and the second bank of the US after causing the inflationary bubble to grow to finance the war, Napoleonic War in 1820, and the expansion of cotton belt and the land boom, right? This is causing what is happening before. And finally, after the panic 1819, the farmland dropped 75% and the cotton value dropped 25%. And then what happened in England? It happened in 1825. England continued to right expansionary monetary policy by the Bank of England to finance the French Revolution and Napoleonic War in 1850. And as a result of this panic, 70 banks failed and bankruptcy doubled, publisher collapsed, reinstatement of gold standard to tighten the lending. So basically they are backing the currency to the gold standard again to save the currency from collapsing, right? And Panic 1870 happening again. So this is another Jubilee years, right? Jubilee years happen every 50 years. 1820, 1870, 1920, and 1970. So we learn from the history. And 1870 in Europe and North America, it is an economic crisis that triggered economic depression lasted from 1873 until 79, known as Long Depression in Europe or Great Depression in US. The crisis caused by inflationary bubble of the rampant speculative investment in railroad. During that time, US has a lot of railroad construction all over the country, and this is a backbone of the economy during that time. And then there are demonetization of silver in Europe and major losses on property fire. At the time, Europe are starting to create another currency after the another money after the gold, which is printing the silver money. Right? And it caused the bank reserve to plummet 60% because of property fire all over the country, right? And then NYSE New York Stock Exchange closed 10 days. As a result, 50 railroad company failed and 60 bank bankrupt in the US. Factory closed down, unemployment spiked, property value collapsed, company profit vanished, state and the wages cut, and great railroad strike. So many demonstrations happened during that time. In Europe, expansionary policy is due to the German unification, West and Eastern German are unified, and introduction of the gold standard, right? They're back to the gold standard again, and Vienna Stock Exchange crash, Berlin Railway Empire crash, Britain opening Suez Canal caused a massive flooding of the goods to the British warehouse and caused the goods to plummet. The price goes down. That crisis spread to other countries like India, South Africa, Ottoman Empire, and triggering the tariff protection for each region. Right. So what we learned from the another things happening again in 1920s. What we learned from it is during this is called the period of Great Depression, right? So this happened after the Dow Jones Index crashed 40% in 1920. The economy of US finally expanded rapidly because of stimulus package, right? And the wealth of the nation doubled down in 1929. However, basically what is happening is that the government is delaying the crash, right? The crash happened in 1929. The DJI stock crashed 80%, triggering global Great Depression that is bottoming in 1933 and lasted until 1939. During that time, house price collapsed 70% and then unemployment rate spiked 25%. Many countries abandoned the gold standard, right? And the gold are confiscated. If you have gold, the gold will be taken by government. During that time, it's very bad years, right? And all asset price collapsed, wages dropped 50%. So that's very bad. right? And then the banking panic started in 1930s, right, until 1932, which is a cause of multiple bank runs. So many people are panicking and they are starting to draw their deposit, but they cannot get their deposit. So the bank has to close down because the bank had already lended their deposit to company, corporate, etc. And many people are get defaulted and they are unable to pay their debt. Right? And then nearly 9,000 banks goes bankrupt, right, all over the world, and deposit frozen in 1933. Germany and British bank collapsed in 1931. Crisis spread all over the world from Europe, Asia, Africa, Soviet Union, and also Middle East. And then several countries actually entered into major hyperinflation, such as Poland, Australia, Germany, and caused the inflation jump over 1,000%. And this also triggered another socialist unrest, right? So the rise of Marxism and Fascism in Germany and Japan and caused the World War II started in 1939. Right? And what we learned from the stagflation in 1970, which is another jubilee year, that the US abandoned the gold standard via Bretton Woods Agreement in 1978 because of budget deficit for funding the Vietnam War in 1995, 1955, 1975. What is happening is that US has a budget deficit, and the people are the bank are central bank are lending the money to the people, where the amount of the money in the system are much more than the gold can back out. So when the people are panicking, they want to buy the gold. However, the central bank does not have enough gold to return back to the people, so they have to abandon gold standard, right? Okay, as a result of the stubborn inflation, CPI remained elevated in 15%, double-digit CPI, oil price jumped 6 times, and unemployment hit 10%. That Fed forced to hike interest rate 20% and causing wages wave of countries, corporate, personal bankruptcy all over the world because sudden spike of 20% interest rate. That's a huge percent, right? If you have 30 years market or maybe 20 years market, 20 times 20% is like 400%, times 30% is 600%. So it's a lot amount of mortgage. This is not an accurate number, but it's huge number. So as you have to pay back 6 times of your house price, original price. That's crazy, right? That's a crazy mortgage amount. So that's why there are wave of homeless during that time. This recession happened in 1973 and 1975, where US and UK GDP declined 5%, double-digit inflation raised 15%, unemployment 10%, manufacturing triple, multiple strike across the country, and wages, however, double, right? Even then, they are unable to cover the suffering that is beyond people understanding, right? Several countries enter into major hyperinflation, such as Indonesia, Chile, Argentina, Israel, Bolivia, etc. Right? That's what we learned from depression in the past. However, recently we also entering a major depression as well, right? A major recession in 2020, right? Where the global stock market crashed 40% in February 2020, right? Exactly during the Jubilee years, and unemployment rate spiked, right? 15% in the US, and it is estimated that 500 million people lost their job all over the world due to the coronavirus spread, right? This is happening last year, 2020. That lockdown implemented all over the world. Airplane and ship global travel are halted, right? Yeah, so the world for 2 or 3 years, right? And then up until today, it still remains difficult to travel to another country without any quarantines, right? Then the global factory are shut down, the service industry devastated, manufacturing output sharp decline, government extends stimulus package to sustain the asset price from crashing, and then there are bounce back of the stock price, but the economy remain weak. So basically, the stock price during this period of time, however, bounced back after that because of stimulus package. However, the economy remained weak, right? The job unemployment spike, right? Even though now it's recovering, but it still depends on the stimulus package from the government. Many developer goes bankrupt. You can see the news all over the US, China, and etc. and many other countries. they cannot pay their debt and the land has to be repossessed by the government. And many property can't be sold and mortgager become insolvent because people are not able to pay their mortgage. And then property price drop and the cost of borrowing spike because of the interest rate hike. And the interest rate hike because of the inflation skyrocketing, right? Aftermath the pandemic, inflation jumped and central bank started to hike the interest rate. And after a decade of monetary zero rate monetary policy, right, global asset price decline is expected, right? So this will happening in the next couple of years. There will be a post-Jubilee stress where the debt cycle will crash down to the bottom, right? And people who are in debt, in high leverage of debt, will be in trouble. Those countries, companies, and also any people who are in high leverage of debt has to leverage down. Those people are the ones who are worst affected. Right? That's what we learned from video today, and thank you for listening. And thank you for joining us. I'll see you for another next video. Bye bye.